All right. So we're going to continue. All right. So today we're going to do something a little bit different. So we're going to speak about the. So can you see the screen, by the way?
No.
All right. So should Yahuwah's people still observe the feast without the temple, outside of Yarushalam, or without knowing exactly when?
Of course, this topic is done because of questions that we have received, and also based on debates we see going on regarding whether or not the feast should still be observed, since the temple is not there for sacrifices, and we're not all in Yarushalam, and we don't all have the dates perfected. So should we still observe the feast? Let us allow the word of the Most High Yahuah to respond. Barak Yahuah.
Barak Yahuah.
Barak Yahuah.
All right, so the three major feasts commanded by Yahuwah: unleavened bread, Feast of Weeks, as some may know it as Pentecost, and the Feast of Tabernacles, were observed in the place where Yahuwah chooses, as stated in Adabarim, Deuteronomy 16, verse 2. Now, during these three feasts, the males appear in Yarusalam before Yahuwah. Yarusalam before Yahuwah. But what about observing all 8 feasts? Let us not forget that the Shabbat is also a feast. The idea of some in the nation that the feast of Yahuwah can only be observed in Jerusalem is based on passage like Adabarim or Deuteronomy 16, verse 5 to 6, where Yahuwah commands that the Passover sacrifice be offered at the place in which Yahuwah your Elohim shall choose, which later became Yarusalam. So we're going to ask someone to read Adabarim 16, verse 5 to 6.
Okay, get it.
Okay.
16:5-6.
Khan.
You are not allowed to slaughter the Pesah within any of your gates which Yahuwah your Elohim gives you, but at the place where Yahuwah your Elohim chooses to make his name dwell. There you slaughter the Pesah in the evening at the going down of the sun, at the appointed time you came out of Mitzrayim.
Todah, for reading. So observe, however, the Torah also repeatedly commands that these feasts be observed throughout all generations in all dwellings. Though Yahuwah knew before that his people would be scattered among the nation. However, there are instances in Scripture where these feasts were observed outside of Jerusalem due to historical or situational reason. So Yahuwah's eternal command, observe in all generations. Yahuwah gave the feast or festival as perpetual statutes. We're going to look at these chapter and verses. Shamut or Exodus 12, verse 14, and Wikara or Leviticus 23, verse 31. Can I ask someone to read it for us? So, could you repeat that?
You say Shamut.
Shamut or Exodus 12, verse 14. That's the one you just read. Read Akil.
All right, so let me read that. And this yom shall become to you a remembrance, and you shall celebrate it as a festival to Yahuah throughout your generations. Celebrate it as a festival and everlasting law.
All right, toda for reading. Now, Uikara 23 or Leviticus 23, verse 31. Ask someone to read it for us.
Sure. 23:31. You do not work a law forever through your generations in all your dwellings. Yeah.
All right, Toda. Note that these verses emphasize that Yahuwah expects his people to keep his feast, no matter where they live or even in exile.
So what you'll find is being emphasized a lot in these scriptures are the instructions throughout all your generations in all your dwellings. So irrespective of time, generational time, or wherever you live, we're expected to observe the feasts of the Most High, to obey his instructions, his commands, his statutes, anywhere we are, at whatever generation we fall.
All right, Toda for sharing. So before Yarushalam was established as a central place of worship, so the Passover was at Gilgal. And we're going to read Yahusha ben Nun, Joshua 5, verse 10 to 12. I ask someone to read it for us.
It says, and the children of Israel camped at Gilgal and performed the Pasach on the 14th yom of the new month at evening on the desert plains of Yaricha. And they ate of the stored grain of the land on the morrow after the Pasach, unleavened bread and roasted grain on this same yom. 12. And the manna ceased on the yom after they had eaten the stored grain of the land. And the children of Israel no longer had manna, but they ate the food of the land of Canaan that year.
All right, total for reading. So even after entering the promised land, we saw where Israel celebrate the Passover at Gilgal, near Yarico, or some may know as Jericho. This was before the temple, or Yarusalam, became the designated place of worship. So while the people of Israel were encamped at Gilgal, they kept the Passover on the 14th yom of the month in the evening on the plains of Jericho.
We want to also bear in mind that the scripture says we must, it was wherever Yahuah chose. Wherever Yahuah chose, because it is his feast. And so he's the one who chooses where we are to observe these feasts. And his instruction perpetually would have been throughout all the generations in all your dwellings. Eventually we see where a temple is built by Shalum, and he says, well, I have selected this place for my people to come before me. But we see before the temple was built, he would have selected Gilgal. And as we proceed, we will see another location. But we will observe that Yahuah is not static in what he does. Yahuah will choose wherever he wants his feasts to be observed.
Yahuah. So the feast of Sila or Shiloh, we're gonna read Saphatim, Judges 21, verse 19. But I'll ask someone to read it for us. Can you hear us?
No, we slow over here.
All right. Can you see the screen also?
Yes. You're looking. Somebody else can go.
All right, so Shabath 21:19. So they said, see, there is a yearly festival of Yahuah in Shelah or Shiloh, which is north of Baithal, on the east side of the highway that goes up from Baithal to Shaham, and south of Lebanon or Labonah.
All right, so now for reading. So during the period of the Judges, the tabernacle was established in Shiloh and feasts were observed there. So scattering foretold, yet feast must continue. Yahuah foretold that Israel would be scattered, but still command obedience. We're going to look at Adabarim, Deuteronomy 30, verse 1 to 2.
Okay, you all.
And it shall be, when all these words come upon you, the barakah and the curse, which I have put before you, and you shall bring them back to your heart among all the Gentiles, where Yahuah your Lord drives you, and shall turn back to Yahuah your Lord and obey his voice, according to all that I command you today, with all your heart, with all your being, you and your children.
All right, Toda for reading. So this means that even while in exile, Israel was expected to remember and obey Yahuwah's instructions, including his feasts. So during the Babylonian exile, so while in Babylon, Israel could not travel to Yarushalam to celebrate the feast as commanded. They likely observed Passover and other festivals symbolically or through remembrance. For example, we're going to look at Daniel's devotion, and looking at Daniel's 6 verse 10.
Daniel 6 verse 10, and it says, and Daniel, when he knew that the writing was signed, went home, and in his upper room with his windows open towards Yarushalam, he knelt down on his knees 3 times a yom and prayed and gave thanks before his Yahuah, as he had done before.
All right, total for reading. So, although not explicitly tied to the feast, Daniel's dedication to prayer and worship in exile reflects the loyal observance of Yahuwah's instruction during this period.
So worship would have been done wherever he was. He did not have the opportunity or the liberty to travel to Yarushalam to worship Yahuah. And so he simply worshipped wherever he was, in this case, in his room, facing Yarushalam.
The Yahuwah. All right, can you hear us and can you see what's on the screen? All right, all right, so sacrificial requirements versus feast observance. So yes, the temple sacrifices were required for some feasts, like the Pasach or the Passover in Adabarim 16 verse 5 to 7. But these instructions were linked to the existence of the temple. When the first temple was destroyed in 586 BCE, and again in 70 BCE, CE, sacrifices ceased, but the feast did not end. The feasts are more than simple sacrifices. They are appointed times or a muadym for meeting with Yahuwah. So even without the temple, we can still keep the Shabbat rest of the feast. And we're going to look at these scriptures. We're going to look at Uikara 23, verse 3, and then verse 32. Also, we're going to ask someone to read Shamut, Exodus 12, verse 26 to 27, and Adabarim 16, verse 11 to 14.
All right, Oikara 23, verses 3, 32, and 43. So verse 3 says, 6 Yomim work is done, but the 7th Yom is a Shabbat of rest, a dedicated gathering. You do no work. It is a Shabbat to Yahuah in all your dwellings.
All right. So that for reading.
32. It is a Shabbat of rest to you, and you shall afflict your beings. This is, of course, Yom Kippur. On the 9th Yom of the new month at evening, from the evening of the 9th Yom to the evening of the 10th Yom, you observe your Shabbat. So this one is Yom Kippur. So we keep the Shabbat rest of the feast. So there are two feasts that we just read about, the weekly feast and Yom Kippur, which were commanded to be Sabbath feasts of rest wherever we were. Well, I guess I can read verse 43 for the next part.
So recount the historical significance of each feast. So again, I'm going to ask someone to read Shamut, Exodus 12, verse 26 to 27.
I would just read it. Read what I can hear you.
Can someone read it for us? Exodus, Shamut 12.
He waiting on Deuteronomy.
Oh, went to the wrong book.
Or whilst they're finding Exodus or Shamut, let me just read verse 43 of Uikara 23. It says, so that your generations know that I made the children of Israel dwell in booths when I brought them out of the land of Mitzrayim. I am Yahuah, your Elohim. So this, of course, would be speaking of the Feast of Sukkot, or Tabernacles.
All right, for reading. So Shamut 12, verse 26 to 27.
Okay, got you. Okay. 12, 26, 27. And it shall be when your children say to you, what does this service mean to you? Then you shall say, it is the Pasah slaughtering of Yahuah, who passed over the houses of the children of Yasharel in Mizraim, when he smote the Mitzrites and delivered our households. And the people bowed their heads and did obeisance.
All right, so the for reading. So even without the temple, we can still rejoice before Yahuah with remembrance, prayer, and study. I'm going to ask one to read Adabarim or Deuteronomy 16, verse 11 to 14.
And you shall rejoice before Yahuah your Lord, you and your son, and your daughter, and your male servant, and your female servant, and the Levite who is within your gates, and the stranger, and the fatherless, and the widow who is in your midst, at the place where Yahuah your Lord chooses to make his name dwell. And you shall remember that you were a slave in Mizraim, and you shall guard and do all these laws. Perform the festival of Sukkot for 7 days, after in gathering from your threshing floor and from your winepress. And you shall rejoice in your festival, you and your son, and your daughter, and your male servant, and your female servant, and the Levite, and the stranger, and the fatherless, and the widow who are within your gates. Shalom.
Toda for reading. Toda for reading. So observing Yahuwah's feast in exile. So he knew where we would be. One of the strongest Hebraic principles is that Yahuwah's commands are eternal and given with full knowledge of the future. He knew Israel would be scattered, yet he still commanded that the feast be observed throughout all your generations and in all your dwellings. And we read part of this, but I'm going to ask someone to read Ukar 23, verse 14, verse 21, and verse 31.
Right, so Leviticus or Ukar 23 verse 14 says, and you do not eat bread or roasted grain or fresh grain until the same yom that you have brought an offering to your Elohim, a law forever throughout your generations in all your dwellings. Verse 21, and on this same yom or day, you shall proclaim a dedicated gathering for yourselves. You do no servile work on it. A statute forever in all your dwellings throughout your generations. And verse 31, you do no work. A statute forever, or a command forever, or a law forever, throughout your generations, in all your dwellings.
All right, toda for reading. So Yahuwah's foreknowledge of Israel's scattering. So from the beginning, Yahuwah told Israel that disobedience would lead to exile. Yet he still commanded them to keep his commands and statutes wherever they went. So we're going to look at some verses. We're going to ask someone to read Adabarim or Deuteronomy 4, verse 27, and Adabarim 28 or Deuteronomy 28, verse 64. You still can't hear us, right? And you can still see what's on the screen?
Yes, we can hear.
Anyone? Adabarim or Deuteronomy 4, verse 27 first, and then we're gonna ask someone to grab Adabarim or Deuteronomy 28, verse 64.
All right, so Adabarim 4, or Deuteronomy 4, verse 27. It says, and Yahuah shall scatter you among the peoples, and you shall be left few in number among the nations where Yahuah drives you.
All right, total for reading. And Adabarim 28, verse 64.
Okay, go ahead.
And Yahuwah shall scatter you among all people, one end of the earth to the other, and there shall serve other mighty ones, and there you shall serve my other mighty ones, which neither you nor your fathers have known, wood and stone.
All right, total for reading. So if you notice, despite the scattering, we never see Yahuwah said, while in exile, you should stop keep his commands and statutes. Instead, he told them to remember his commands and return to them wherever they were. We're going to look at Devarim 30, or Deuteronomy 30, looking at verse 1 and 2.
Got it. And it shall be, when all these words come upon you, the barakah and the curse which I have put before you, and you shall bring them back to your heart among all the Gentiles, where Yahuah your Elohim drives you, and shall turn back to Yahuah your Elohim, and obey his voice according to all that I command you today. With all your heart and with all your being, you and your children.
All right, so if obedience includes returning to Yahuwah's darakim, our ways, then observing his feast is part of that return, no matter where we are. So the feasts are eternal, not temporary. Many assume that without the Aikal, or temple, the feasts are void. However, Yahuwah said the feasts are forever. And we read these earlier, Shamu 12, verse 14, or Exodus 12, verse 14, and Wikara, Leviticus 23, verse 41. So since Yahuwah's word does not change, his feasts remain binding wherever his people live. We're going to look at Malachi 3, verse 6 to 7.
Right, so Malachi 3, verses 6 to 7. It says, "For I am Yahuah, I shall not change, and you, O sons of Jacob, shall not come to an end. For the guym of your abim, or your fathers, you have turned aside from my laws, and did not guard them. Turn back to me, and I shall turn back to you, said Yahuah of armies. But you said, in what shall we turn back? Would a man rob?"
7.
Oh, verse 7. Oh. Turn back to me.
That's what I can go into. All right. Toda for reading. So Yahuwah said to observe the feast in all your dwellings. So the phrase in all your dwelling appears multiple times in the Torah in connection with the feast. This means observance was not restricted to Yarushalam. So we did read Uikara, Leviticus 23, verse 14, and Uikara, the same chapter, but verse 31. If Yahuwah only wanted the feast to be observed in Yarushalam, why did he command them to be kept in all their dwellings? So this shows that while certain temple, Aikal related sacrifices were limited to Yarusalam, the overall observance of the feast, the gathering, The resting, the rejoicing, and the remembering was always meant to be universal for Israel, wherever they live. Yada Yahuah.
Yada Yahuah. I do have a question though.
You go ahead.
Okay, so of course we've heard what you guys heard, and you know, just to question it, what scriptures gave them the impression that we I mean, just to think now, because I don't know if you know, but what scriptures could have given them the impression that we should not you know, practice the feast because we are still in exile, you know? What scriptures could have given them that? Because in honesty, we have been in well, listened to, not been in, but we have listened to some YouTube tubers saying that you should not do to us being in exile, and forever does not always mean forever. Okay, Huda.
This confusion we would have looked at in the first scripture in Hadabarim, where because the instruction was given for certain sacrifices to be done in the Haikal or the temple. And so the idea that the feast cannot be done unless there's the temple because we need the sacrifices in order to eat the lamb, many persons miss the purpose of the feast. And as Zakan said earlier in the presentation, the feasts are not defined simply by sacrifices. So, though the instruction was given for certain sacrifices, it wasn't for all the feasts. There were some feasts, for example, Pesach, where the sacrificing of the lamb, etc., would have been done at the temple. But as we go along, we will see how the sacrifices are now treated. But they miss the fact that it's a covenantal instruction. It is not limited to one place. The scripture continues to reiterate that it is wherever Yahuah chooses. And he continues to say, in all your dwellings. So one, the confusion starts because of the instruction that certain sacrifices in those times were to be done in the Haikal or in the temple. Secondly, there were three major feasts where the males would go before the Most High. But scripture tells us that it is the place where Yahuah chose. When before Shaluma built the temple, they would come before Yahuah in wherever he chose. He would have chosen Gilgal. He would have chosen Shiloh or Shiloh. When the temple was built, he then chose a temple. Then the temple is no longer, he chooses all our dwellings. He chooses wherever he wants the feast to be observed. And I might preempt a little bit, but I won't go too deep because I know he will cover this in the presentation. But now we are no longer required to do sacrifices. And yet Yahuah still says, throughout all your generations. So some people apparently missed the all your generations bit and the in all your dwellings bit. And as Zakan stated, Yahuah would have given these instructions with knowledge that we are going into exile. He knew already, nothing took him by surprise. He knew already that there would be generations in exile, yet he says in all your generations, in all your dwellings, you're supposed to observe this. These are instructions or statutes forever. And so persons would have limited their thinking to the instruction for particular sacrifices in particular feasts. And they would have also limited their thoughts to one of the places Yahuah would have chosen throughout the history, which would have been Yarushalam. But we see evidence of him choosing other places. And we see evidence of even Daniel worshiping wherever he was in exile. And the feasts are a form of worship unto the Most High Yahuah. So it is those primary instructions that people would have simply extracted from scripture and created doctrinal principles that go against the all your generations instruction or statute and the all your dwelling statutes, limiting it to a geographical location. Yahuah's instructions and his commands, his feasts, his festivals, when it comes to the where, the emphasis is on where Yahuah chooses.
Yahuah.
I wonder what when it says on the 14th Yom, so shouldn't that be the day of the Passover? It's not the Passover. Shouldn't it be on the 14th of every year?
Say again?
On the 14th Yom, the beginning of the year, shouldn't it be every 14th Yom? Every year?
So every year in the first month, on the 14th of that month, Khan.
Right.
So for them to say do not, when the years don't stop, and this is another thing too, for them to say we don't need to observe the feasts anymore because we're not in Yarushalam, means they're also saying we should not observe the Shabbat. Because the Shabbat was the first named feast in Oikara 23. It's the only weekly feast. So he would have first named, he said, these are the feasts that you are to observe. And he started with the Shabbat. And then he would have named those that are done once per year, which were the annual feast, the 7 others. So 7 annual feasts, 1 weekly feast, 8 feasts in total were named. And so to say that these ones are separated and should not be held, Yahuah never gave such an instruction. So as you said, every year, he said every year, the 14th Yom of the first month. So every year, irrespective of where you are, irrespective of when you are born, you are expected to return to him and to observe his commands and statutes.
But we did it last year. We missed it this year. We just all confused.
No, well, Pasach is tomorrow evening. And of course, followed by unleavened bread and first fruit waving of the Omer. But we will cover certain areas as we go through the presentation.
Okay, so wait, what? you said Pasach is tomorrow? Okay, so is that okay, so why do people celebrate it on April 1st?
The matter of dates is a very big matter. You will find that there are different systems of reckoning time that are followed. We will address this briefly later in the presentation, but just to quickly say, there is nothing new under the sun.
Right.
And what we find is there are divisions now in various communities of the nation of Israel with regards to which reckoning of time should be followed. Some follow the Zadok system. Some follow the Enochian system. Some follow lunar observances. Some just go along with the Gregorian year as it is. The fact that there are different reckonings that were historically found tells us that even in those back then, after the scattering, the people had similar challenges as different communities followed different reckonings. Because to find different reckonings in historical records meant that the same issue of different communities having different observances of time existed then as it does now. But Yahuah addresses this, and we will speak to what the time to come as Yahuah have it. But it's a matter of differing reckonings of time that cause different people to observe at different times.
Gotcha.
All right. So we're going to take a 20 minutes break, and then we return. All right.
Yeah, to that. Wow.
Shabbat Shalom, Mashpakhah. Can you hear us?
Khan, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. All right. So before we continue, just want to read something. A question was asked earlier. I want to read Jubilees or Jubilees 1, verse 13, and also Jubilees 6, or Jubilees 6, verse 34. And Jubilees 1, verse 13, and they will forget all my statutes and all my commands and all my right rulings, and we go astray as to the new moons and Shabbats and festivals and jubilees and ordinance.
And of course, new moon there is head of month. So it's not the actual moon, it's Rosh Kadashim. So the heads of the selected months, and of course, those were discussed in Jubileum, the head of the first month, the head of the fourth month, the head of the seventh month, and the head of the 10th month. Those are the Rosh Kadashim, heads of months, which of course has been translated by translators as new moons.
All right. And Jubileum or Jubilee 6, verse 34. And all the children of Israel will forget and will not find the part of the years, and will forget the new moons and seasons and Shabbats, and they will go wrong as to all the orders of the years.
So that is in response to what question?
The one that Kim is it Kim Yahu asked earlier?
About why persons celebrate on a different day?
On a different Khan. So that is in relation to the Kim Yahu question.
Okay, thank you.
Hold up. Baba Kasha.
Or your take a break screen still up. Should it be?
Khan, we're gonna skip the
We're going
screen.
to move to the next slide now, but he was responding to the question with some scriptures that were not on the presentation.
Oh, I see. Okay, can I have them again?
All right. So Jubilees, Jubilees 1 verse 13, and they will for. Do you want me to read it or just let you know?
Yeah, I'm writing them down. Yeah, just let me know. I'll check them
All
later.
right. And Jubilees 6 verse 34. Sorry.
Okay, cool. Okay, thank you. To that.
Baba Kasha. All right. So the Nabi or prophets confirm Yahuwah's feasts are for all generation. Can you see what's on the screen? Can you?
Can.
All right. So the Nabim repeatedly call Israel back to Yahuwah's ways, proving that his commands, including the feasts, were never meant to be temporary. So looking at Yakazakal 11, verse 16 to 17, I'm going to ask someone to read it first.
What's Yaka's call?
Ezekiel.
To that.
Arakasha.
Ezekiel 11 verses 16 to 17.
Khan.
Therefore say, this is what Yahuah says. Although I have sent them far off among the nations, and although I have scattered them among the lands, yet I was for them a dedicated place, or a Kadash place, for a little while, in the lands to which they came. Therefore say, this is what Yahuah says, and I shall gather you from the peoples, and I shall assemble you from the lands where you have been scattered, and I shall give you the land of Israel.
For reading. So since Yahuwah himself is a sanctuary to his people wherever they are, they can honor him and his appointed times even outside of Yarusalam. So furthermore, Zechariah prophesied that all nations would keep the feast in the future reign. And we can read Zechariah 14 verse 16.
And it shall be that all who are left from all the nations which came up against Yarushalam shall go up from year to year to bow themselves to the sovereign Yahuwah of hosts, and to celebrate the festival of Sukkot.
All right, so that's for reading. So if Yahuwah expect future nation to keep the feast, then scattered Israel now should do the same. So the feasts are about Yahuwah's covenant and not geography. The feasts of Yahuwah are not simply Hebrew breaks from word. They are covenant signs between Yahuwah and his people. They remind Israel of His deliverance, His provision, and His Kadash nature. Oh, and we're going to look at, in a spare time, you can read Shamuta Exodus 12, that speak about the Pasach, but we can look at Uikara 23, verse 42 to 43, speak about Sukkot, and in your spare time, you can read Uikara 16, speak about Yom Kippur. So I'm going to ask someone to read Uikara or Leviticus 23, verse 42 to 43.
So, Wikara 23, verses 42, 43, dwell in booths for 7 Yumim. All who are native born in Yisrael dwell in booths, so that your generations know that I made the children of Israel dwell in booths when I brought them out of the land of Mitzrayim. I am Yahuah, your Elohim.
All right, Torah for reading. So these truths do not change based on geography. Israel is scattered, we are still his people, and we are still called to honor his appointed times. Yahuah. All right, can you see what's on the screen? And can you hear us anyway?
On.
All right. So the temple sacrifices were location specific, but the feasts were not. One of the main misunderstandings about the feast of Yahuah is the assumption that because the temple no longer stands, the feast cannot be observed. However, a Hebraic understanding of the Torah shows that only the sacrificial aspect of the feast were tied to the temple and not the observance itself. So Yahuah command feast to be observed, but sacrifices had a specific location. In the Torah, Yahuah made a distinction between observing the feast and offering sacrifices. I know we read Uikara 23 verse 2 and 4 already. The command to observe the feast was given to all generations, meaning it was not dependent on a physical location. However, the sacrifices for the feast were tied specifically to the place where Yahuah chose to place his name, Yarushalam. So we're going to ask someone to read Adabarim 12, verse 5 to 6.
Put his name there for his dwelling place. Sending offerings and your slaughterings and your slaughters and your tithes and the contributions of your hand and your vowed offerings and your voluntary offerings and the firstling of your herd and of your flocks.
All right, to the for reading. So this means that while sacrifices could only take place in the temple, Aikal, the feasts themselves were never dependent on the temple's existence. All right. So the feasts themselves were never dependent on the temple's existence. So Yahusha is now our Passover lamb and final atonement. When the Aikal stood, or the temple stood, the Levitical priests offer sacrifices during the feast, especially on the Passover, where the lamb was slain in the Aikal. Yom Kippur, on the Day of Atonement, the high priest made atonement for Israel. And we're going to look at these verses. We're going to look at Shammut 12, verse 6, and our Exodus 12, verse 6, and Adabarim 16, verse 5 to 6. And then I'm going to ask someone else to read Leviticus or Urkara 16, verse 29 to 34. Anyone? Shammut 12, verse 6, or Exodus 12, verse 6. Can you hear us?
Khan, you wanted to read in Leviticus 16?
So let's read Shammut 12, verse 6 first, and Adabarim 16, verse 5 to 6. Looking at the lamb was slain in the Aikal.
Okay, in Shammut 12, verse 6. And you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same new moon or new month. Right? The new month.
Khan, and Adabarim, or Deuteronomy 16, verse 5 to 6.
And then all the assembly of the congregation of Israel shall slay it between the evenings. You are not allowed to slaughter the Pasach within any of your gates, which Yahuah your Elohim gives you, but at the place where Yahuah your Elohim chooses to make his name dwell. There you slaughter the Pasach in the evening at the going down of the sun at the appointed time you came out of Mitzrayim.
All right, Torah for reading. And Leviticus, that we par 16, verse 29 to 34.
And this shall be for you a statute forever. In the 7th Rosh Chodesh, on the 10th Yom of that month, you afflict your beings and do no work, and the native or the stranger who sojourns among you. For on that Yom he makes atonement for you. Where am I? To cleanse you, to be clean from all your crimes before Yahuah. It is a Shabbat of rest for you, and you shall afflict your beings, a law forever. And the priest or Kahan, who is anointed and ordained to serve as Kahan in his Ab's or father's place, shall make atonement and shall put on the linen garments, the dedicated garments or the Kadash garments, and he shall make atonement for the most Kadash place, and make atonement for the tent of appointment, and for the slaughter place, and make atonement for the Kahanim, and for all the people of the assembly. And this shall be for you a statute forever, to make atonement for the children of Israel for their crookedness once a year. And he did as Yahuah commanded. Masha.
All right, total for reading. So from all these scripture, you see where the Levitical priests offer sacrifices during the feast. Now, with the death and resurrection of Yahusha, he fulfilled the sacrificial requirements, meaning the atonement aspect of the feast are now fulfilled in him. So Yahusha as the Passover lamb. We can look at Yochanan or John 1 verse 29. First Corinthians 5 verse 7, or Corinthians 5 verse 7, and Matthew 26 verse 28. So I'm going to ask the individual to read for us.
Okay, I'll take Yahukanan, and it's Yahukanan 29. On the next day, Yahukanan saw Yahusha coming toward him and said, "See, the Lamb of Yahuah who takes away the kata of the world."
All right, so the for reading. First Corinthians or First Corinthians 5 verse 7.
What is that?
Corinthians
5:7.
Oh, Corinthians.
Therefore, cleanse out the old leaven, so that you are a new lump, as you are unleavened. For also Mashiach, our Pesach, was offered for us.
Yada Yahuah. Matthew 26 verse 28.
That's Matthew.
Matthew.
You say 26, 28?
Khan.
All right. And so for this is my blood, that of the renewed covenant, which is shed for many of the forgiveness of katas, or a katasim, I think.
Or wrongs, or
Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to learn the words here.
Right.
Still in your book.
That's right.
Right. So that for reading.
Okay. We used to say the crime and stuff, but now I'm in your book now.
That's right. That's right.
So here we see Yahusha fulfill the sacrificial requirements. So meaning that the atonement aspect of the feast are now fulfilled in him.
Yes, I'm off.
So Yahusha's death was the ultimate Passover sacrifice, making animal sacrifices unnecessary for redemption. However, the Passover itself is still to be observed. I'm going to repeat. However, the Passover itself is still to be observed. Just as Paul encouraged the believers in 1 Corinthians or 1 Corinthians 5 verse 8, If the feasts were abolished, Paul would not have encouraged believers to keep them in a Mashiach. All right? So, gonna ask someone to read 1 Corinthians 5, verse 8.
So then, let us observe the festival, not with old leaven, nor with the leaven of evil and wickedness, but with the leavened bread of sincerity and truth.
All right. Toda for reading. Again, we see here Paul encourage believers to keep the feast in a Mashiach. Now, Yahusha as the atonement for wrongs. So we're going to look at Abarim 9, verse 12, or Hebrews 9, verse 12, and Hebrews 10, verse 4. Abarim 10, verse 4. Could I ask someone?
I got them ready. Yes, I got them ready right here. 9:12, entered into the Kodash, Mikdash, once for all, not with the blood of goats and calves, but with his own blood, having obtained everlasting redemption. And Abarim 10,
Khan
14 states,
4,
for by
10, verse.
one That's correct. Oh, 10:4. Okay. For it is impossible for blood of bulls and goats to take away kata,
Kataib.
right? Katai. Okay, got you.
And Rabatu. Very good. Very well.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So Yahusha fulfilled the atonement aspect of the feast, but Yom Kippur itself as a dedicated time of Teshuvah, or repentance and renewal, is still significant.
All right. So let me.
So the feasts are now celebrated in Mashiach without the temple sacrifices. So since Yahusha is our final sacrifice, how do we keep the feast now? We observe them as memorials of Yahuwah's appointed time, times of remembrance. We recognize Yahusha's fulfillment of the sacrificial system, but we still honor the dedicated appointed Yomim, or appointed days. We rejoice in Yahuwah's plan of redemption, knowing the feast point to both Mashiach's first and the second coming. So the early believers continue keeping the feast after Yahusha's resurrection. And we're gonna read Acts 2, verse 1. Mahasim. And also we're gonna look at Acts 20 and Mahasim 20, verse 16. And Acts Mahasim 27, verse 9. Who's gonna read for us?
I got the first one. And the day of the festival of Shavuot had come. They were all with one mind in one place.
Total for reading. Mahasim 20, verse 16.
For Shaul had decided to sail past Ephesus so that he might lose no time in Asia, for he was hurrying to be at Yarushalayim, if possible, on the day of the festival of Shabath.
All right, Torah. And 27, verse 9.
And much time having passed, and the sailing now being dangerous, because the fast was already over, Shaul advised them.
All right, Torah for reading. So we see that even without the temple, the feasts were still observed by Yahusha's followers. So the feasts are shadows of what is to come. Paul describes the feasts as shadows of future events, meaning they will still hold prophetic significance. We're going to look at Colossians 2, verse 16 to 17. I also want to read it first.
Let no one therefore judge you in eating or in drinking, or in respect of a festival, or in a new moon or Shabbath, which are the shadow of what is to come, but the body of HaMashiach. Let no one deprive you of the prize, one who takes delight in false humility and worship of messengers, taking his stand on what he has not seen, puffed up by his fleshly mind.
To the for reading. So the feasts were never abolished. Instead, they pointed to Mashiach and his future reign. So the fall feast, trumpets, atonement, and tabernacles still owe prophetic fulfillment in Yahusha's second coming. So the blood of the Lamb in Shamut, or Exodus 12, covered the homes of Israel. Yahusha's blood covers and redeems us from crookedness and death.
Yahuah.
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 So what may we eat for Passover and unleavened bread? Lamb, bitter herbs, unleavened bread, and possible wine. And we're going to look at these scripture that's on the screen. We're going to look at Shamut 12, verse 3 to 6, and verse 8 to 9, and then verse 15 to 20, and verse 46. And then someone else going to read Leviticus 23, verse 6 to 8, and someone else read Adabarin 16, verse 3 to 4, and Yahuah 26, verse 29. Wes and Alexis, someone raise a hand.
Kanach, it was me. I actually had a couple of questions. I understand if maybe they might need to be saved for after the discussion. But I wanted to ask, this is something that I have started looking into just recently, but I was trying to find where, if you all could help me, where in the Tanakh or the Old Testament does it mention that the Passover lamb, or that the lamb that was killed for Passover was intended to be for sin specifically, because I was just viewing it as more of an act of obedience for protection and their allegiance to Yahuah, but I haven't seen a verse I see verses, for example, in Leviticus that talk about it, lambs being able to be brought as sin offerings, but I don't see anywhere where it says that a lamb is specifically supposed to be killed for Passover, for specifically for sin. And then my other question was, because we wanted to eat lamb for Pesach, but I was wondering, do we need to eat lamb if it's not, because they killed the lamb and then the lamb that they sacrificed, that was the lamb that they ate from, the lamb that they sacrificed. And since we're, clearly we're not slaughtering these lambs, but we're just eating lamb because that was what Yisrael was doing. Does it still apply to us to eat the lamb if we didn't sacrifice it? I don't know if that makes sense.
All right, Tada, for your questions, beloved. The act of atonement using the lambs goes across various feasts. It's not confined to Pesach. All right? Is someone saying something? Oh, okay. It's not confined to Pesach. We see throughout Oikara 4 and also Oikara 16, those chapters where you have different sacrificial offerings for atonement. But for the Pesach, it was not for the purpose of atonement, but for covering and redemption. When Yahusha HaMashiach now became the atonement, it did away with the sacrificial system. And so Yahusha HaMashiach is now the lamb which was slain for our redemption. In that time for Pesach specifically, remember Yahusha is not only the lamb for Pesach, but the lamb overall, which was slain for the atonement of our crimes. And so for Pesach, they would have been redeemed from the enslavement of Mitzrayim or Egypt. When Yahusha HaMashiach died for us, we were redeemed from the enslavement of wrongs or sin or chataim. So we were enslaved to the crimes or sin, but Yahuah has made us free, and whom the Son has made free is free indeed. So there are a lot of Hebraic nuances when it comes to responding to that. The feasts now are times of remembrance. We are not subscribing to the old system of going to temples to do sacrifices, etc.
You broke up?
Are you hearing me now?
I hear you now, but it cut off.
Oh, what part did I cut off? What was the last thing you heard?
When you're free indeed.
When you're free indeed.
Khan. So when Yahusha HaMashiach would have been the atonement, when he died, he became the lamb that made us free from the enslavement of our crimes. Whom the Son set free, or whom the Son has made free, is free indeed. The feasts are now observed as times of remembrance and as obedience to Yahuah. We eat the lamb now as an act of remembrance. So it is symbolic. So even though we have nowhere to go to sacrifice lambs, remember the focus is not on the lamb we're eating, but the lamb who was slain so we may be made free, which is Yahusha HaMashiach. Observe throughout various scriptures where different explanations are given for what the people ate. For example, earlier we read about Yahusha ben Nun, Joshua, where the people started to eat of the old grain from the previous year, and they started to eat from the food of the land. And we're told that as a result of that, the manna stopped flowing, but they were still observing the Pesach. We see even in the renewed covenant where Yahushua HaMashiach says, go and prepare the Pesach. And of course, they went and they killed the Pesach. But Yahushua HaMashiach himself is now our Passover lamb. So everything we eat is symbolic. The unleavened bread is symbolic. The bitter herbs is symbolic. The lamb is symbolic. So we do not need the sacrificial system to be in effect in order to consume these meals or the food, whether it is the lamb, bitter herbs, etc. Are you with me?
Fine.
So it has moved away from being confined to going to sacrifice it and then coming to eat it. And now we do it as remembrance. So if you want to eat the lamb, you do it as a form of remembrance. We're remembering what happened when our ancestors were delivered from Yisrael. We're remembering the sacrifice of Yahushua HaMashiach when he died and rose again. It is all now forms of remembrance and obedience unto Yahuah. So we don't need a system where we go and sacrifice lambs in order to eat lamb. Are you with me?
Khan.
I don't know if there's another question I didn't respond to, but I did speak to the fact that for Pasach, the specific use of the lamb and where they ate the lamb, remember they did not go to a temple to do these sacrifices. And when the lamb was slain in that account, it was for the purpose of, one, obedience to Yahuah, two, to protect them from the destruction that was coming, that Leela. And so if anyone was disobedient and did not ensure the blood was covering them, then destruction would enter their home and take away their firstborn. So it was redemption, it was covering for the people of the Most High. But you do see instances in other situations where a lamb would have been used in those times as part of atonement for the chataim or for the wrongs of the people of the Most High.
Chura Kuti, thank you.
Baba Kasha.
All right. So who's gonna read for us? Shamut.
Yeah, Shemut 12:3-6. Speak to all the congregation of Yasharal, saying, on the 10th day of this month shall each one of them is to take for himself a lamb, according to the house of his father, a lamb for a household. And if the lamb is too small and if the household is too small for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next to his house take it according to the number of beings, according to each man's need, you shall make your count for the lamb. Let the lamb be a perfect one, a year-old male. Take it from the sheep or from the goats, and you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month. Then all the assembly of the congregation of Yasharal shall kill it between the evenings. 8 to 9. And they shall eat the flesh on that night, roasted in fire, with unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. Do not eat it raw, nor boiled at all with water, but roasted in fire, its head with its legs and its inward parts.
15 to 20.
15 to 20. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. Indeed, on the first day you shall cause leaven to cease from your houses. For whoever eats leavened bread from the first day until the 7th day, that being shall be cut off from Yasharal. And on the first day is a Kodesh gathering, and on the 7th day you shall have a Kodesh gathering. No work at all is done on them, only that which is eaten by every being. That alone is prepared by you. And you shall guard the mashtrash, for on this same day I brought your divisions out of the land of Mitzrayim. And you shall guard this day throughout your generations, an everlasting law. On the 14th day of the month, in the evening, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month in the evening. For 7 days, no leaven is to be found in your houses. For if anyone eats what is leavened, the same being shall be cut off from the congregation of Yasharal, whether sojourner or native of the land. Do not eat that which is leavened. In all your dwellings, you are to eat unleavened bread. And then 46.
Go ahead.
It is eaten in one house. You are not to take any of the flesh outside of the house, nor are you to break any bone of it.
All right, Toda. Reading.
So we recognize here that there's an emphasis on ensuring the leaven is cleaned out. Now, though this was a physical activity for us now, it is both physical and spiritual. And so not only do we ensure we don't consume anything that has leavening or raising agents, though the world is now consuming cakes and buns and all sort of things with yeast and everything. But the people of the Most High at this time physically does not consume, nor do we have leaven in our homes. But spiritually, we also are required to search ourselves. Is there anything within us that may be considered as bad leaven? Do we have any unforgiveness? Do we have any malice? Akuti read earlier, that we ought to keep the feast with sincerity. When we get to Shabuat, we will hear the type of leaven that we should have. But in this case, the leaven that goes against the Most High, leaven that causes disobedience. Do we have a rebellious root? We need to look within ourselves. Are we saying or doing things that we should not? Or are there things we should be doing but we're not doing or not saying that Yahuah has instructed? So it is not only a physical removal of the leaven from our meal and from our houses, but also a removal of leaven from our ruach or ruach. Anything within us that we need to tashuba from, that we need to repent of and return to Yahuah and turn away from. and especially at the beginning of the year, because it establishes the pace for the rest of our year. We start, in essence, on a clean slate, a fresh start for a fresh year. Are you with me? Is everyone hearing me?
Khan.
On.
All right, so can someone read for us Rikara, Leviticus 23, verse 6 to 8? And in the meanwhile, someone could read go to Adabarim 16, verse 3 to 4, and then someone else can read Yahu or Matthew 26, verse 29.
Leviticus 6. And on the 15th day of this month is the festival of Mashpakhah. To Yahuah, 7 days you eat unleavened bread. On the first day you have a Kadash gathering. You do no servile work. And you shall bring an offering made by fire to Yahuah for 7 days. And on the 7th day is a Kadash gathering. You do no servile work. Yaman.
All right, so that for reading, Adabarim 16, verse 3 to 4, or Deuteronomy 16, verse 3 to 4.
Eat no leavened bread with it. For 7 days you eat unleavened bread with it, bread of affliction, because you came out of the land of Mizraim in haste, so that you remember the day in which you came out of the land of Mizraim, all the days of your life. And no leaven should be seen with you in all your border for 7 days. Neither should the meat which you slaughtered in the evening on the first day stay all night until morning. That's deep. To the
Yahu 26, verse 29.
But I say to you, I shall certainly not drink of this fruit of the vine from now on till that day when I drink it anew with you in the reign of my Father.
So for reading, Yada Yahuah.
Yada Yahuah. So we see here where these were done as these meals were consumed as a form of remembrance. There's something that it represented. And so even though we may not be in a space such as Yarushalam or in a Haikal, we're doing the feast as remembrance unto Yahuah. And we're seeing here where these particular items are named. We hear of lamb or goat. We hear of bitter herbs. We hear of unleavened bread. And we hear where in the case of Yahusha HaMashiach, saying, the wine you are drinking now, which is the drink from the vine. So we know that would have involved grapes. I won't drink with you now until when we get into, the eternal reign. So that shows us they also had some cups of wine, which would come from grapes, from the vine. It does not mean that everyone has to drink wine if they do not feel led to drink wine. For some persons, they drink what they call it, grape juice, because it comes from the vine. But we know in those times when there was celebration, different scriptures show us that wine was a mark of celebration. And so we know they would have had that as well. We're told in Shemot 12 that whilst Matzrim was mourning, the people of the Most High were celebrating and were laughing and were rejoicing. So Pasach is also a time of celebration and rejoicing. And of course, unleavened bread for 7 yumim, by withholding from ourselves leavened bread or anything that has leaven. You know, some people may love cakes or whatever the case may be. But in obedience to Yahuah, it's a time of reflection, a time when we walk in what Yahuah has called us to walk in obedience unto Him, to look at how He delivered our people and how He continues to deliver us over and over. When we are wrong, when we are caught in a very bad spot, He delivers His people. So this is a time when we are reflecting on these things as well, on these activities, this great salvation, this great deliverance that Yahuah has prepared for us, and even more so now through Yahusha HaMashiach and the blood which was shed, so that the dogma which was against us, the handwriting which was against us, which says that we owed a debt because of the wrongs of our people, could be wiped away through the shed blood of Yahusha HaMashiach. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Yahuah. Yada Yahuah. All right. Toda for sharing, Mora. When and how are the Passover and unleavened bread to be observed? Passover, 14th of Abib, or spring season. Prepare late afternoon to evening and eat in the lilah, or night. Do not allow the bakar or morning to catch the food. The bakar prior to preparing the Passover was not commanded at a time of no work, just well as though you are about to go out. A second month was provided still in the spring for those who were on a journey or unclean because of the dead. Unleavened bread, 15th to the 21st of Abib, spring season. Semi-yomim, 1st and 21st yomim, no work, except to gather and prepare the meal, a Kadat convocation or to be held. All leaven must have been cleaned out from your dwelling by the time the 15th arrives. All right.
So we know, of course, we have Pesach tomorrow evening. And then the yom after that, we will have unleavened bread, and we will have a dedicated convocation online, so persons can join convocation online, similar to what we do now for Shabbat gathering. We will also have that on the 15th of Abib, which is for unleavened bread. That's the yom after tomorrow. And we will again have it on the 21st of Abib, which is the 7th yom of unleavened bread. I guess you can count moving forward. So that would fall somewhere on the, I believe, on the
6th Gregorian of April.
That's the 6th of of Gregorian April, right? What time are we having convocation?
We can do 11. 10:30.
10:30 or 11? Which one?
10:30.
So
the same time.
So the same time for Shabbat gatherings, we will have online convocation at 10:30. Jamaica time, 10:30 a.m. on the 15th and 21st.
On the 21st.
Of Abib.
Are you hearing us?
Is it April?
So that would be,
so it would be
the 15th would be Gregorian
31st.
March 31st.
March 31st, Gregorian.
Oh, okay.
And then for
I think we have the dates placed on the post in the post section of the YouTube channel. We have the dates down there posted. But Pesach will be tomorrow evening, and then unleavened bread will be Gregorian March
31st. And
it ends on Gregorian April 6th. April 6th.
Okay, got you. Okay, so do we work tomorrow? I mean, is there work tomorrow? Well, you can take off. Oh.
You were saying something a while ago?
Yeah, do you work? Yes. Do you work tomorrow? Do we not work tomorrow?
We're not told that in the Bakar before Pesach we can't work. So we're not told that tomorrow, for example, in the Yom or in the light or in the day, we're not told that we can't work. What we are told is that we start preparing the meal in the late afternoon. If you read Jubilees 49, it goes in greater details, telling you that the first 3 portions of the Yom is given to light. And so it's during the 3rd portion that we prepare the meals, and then we eat in the Laila. So the 3rd portion would be somewhere between somewhere in the 3-4 p.m. downwards to 6 p.m. region. And then after the transition period of evening, or at transition period of evening onwards into the Lila, from the 3rd part of the Lila, which is the evening, to the 3rd from the 3rd part of the Yom, which is the evening, to the 3rd part of the Lila. Are you hearing me?
Khan.
I'm sorry. Lila means night, right?
Khan.
Okay, got you.
And of course, we're told that we must prepare enough that we can eat. So we're not preparing too much that would need to be left over, because we were told that whatever is left over when the Bakar comes, or when the morning comes, or the dawn comes, we have to get rid of it. And so we only prepare as much as we are able to consume for Pesach. Because when the 15th comes, we are able to prepare a new meal or fresh batch for unleavened bread. Are you with me?
Yes, ma'am. With you.
Khan.
All right.
So what 3rd feast appears in these times? Feast of first fruits, waving of the Omer and or sheaves. We are not instructed cease from work, but we are expected to bring an offering to Yahuah, which may be given to the widows. who have no one, orphans who have no one, and the poor, and the stranger who have nothing among us. When? Spring season. The first yom of the week follow the weekly Shabbat. You can watch our presentation on our channel to see various appointed times or the various feasts presented about a year ago or thereabout.
In this case, what we'll find is that the final yom of unleavened bread will happen to fall on the same yom as the feast of first fruits, waving of the Omer. So in this case, we will not work, but it is not because of the feast of the waving of the Omer, but because it is the final yom of unleavened bread. Nevertheless, we're expected to give something. So we give, whether it is offering, giving something to those who are orphans who have no one, or widows who have nobody, or the poor, or those in essence who are less favored than ourselves and are in need.
So would that be that following, okay, within this week, would that be that following Friday, there's no work?
So there's no work. The final yom of unleavened bread will fall on Gregorian April 6th, which in essence would be a first yom. And it so happened that that is also the first yom is also the yom after the Shabbat, which would have the feast of first fruits waving of the Omer. So the giving is in line with first fruit, with the feast of first fruits, waving of the sheaves. But the no work is in keeping with the final yom or day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, where we will again gather online, but at that time we will gather in the evening, because some persons may be out giving to those who have nothing during the yom. So for example, in Oregon, we intend to visit a children's home and to give whatever we can to them on that yom as giving to Yahuah. And we will then have a convocation in the evening. We will advise you of the time on next Shabbat, Yahuah's willing.
So that is Friday.
Not Friday.
April 6th would be the first yom. If you're looking at a calendar anywhere.
I'm not there.
So the 6th is going to be on first yom.
First yom.
Okay.
Sunday.
So
it's Sunday. Okay. Gotcha.
Well, because we call them by numbers. So you have Yom Akkad, or what they call day one, or first Yom means the first day. So as the one you just said, right?
Okay, all right, and that's the day you don't work.
Khan, in this case, because of the final Yom of Feast of Unleavened Bread.
Got you. Okay. And so as of tomorrow, we just prepare, and then that following day, we eat.
So tomorrow we prepare during the light or the day, then we eat in the night or the Lila.
Got you. Okay.
So we eat what we can. We prepare what we can eat all off. And then The yom after that, or the day after that, will be unleavened bread. We will prepare meals again. And we will eat, but we will also have convocation. And for 7 yumim, or 7 days, beginning from the 15th. So you start those seven yumim counts, not tomorrow, but you start the counts the day after tomorrow, or the yom after tomorrow.
Yeah.
For all those 7 days, or 7 yumim, we don't eat anything with raising agents in them.
Right.
That
Gotcha.
7 yumim count will end on April 6th, which is the 21st of Abib. Are you with me?
Yeah.
Yes.
But if you watch our presentations on the different feasts, you will see how why the feast of first fruits, waving of the Omer, falls on that yom. You'll see a little bit more about unleavened bread, a little bit more on Pasach. So we do have those presentations on the channel. I think we did those about a year or a little over a year ago. So you can go and watch those to have a little more details.
All right, cool. Could you link it?
We'll try to. Oh, we're using the same device. Not sure if anyone else could search for those links and send them in the chat for us. Because if we try to do it on the laptop, it's going to interrupt the presentation. And the other device we can connect with because of our challenge that we indicated earlier. I don't think the electricity is back yet.
Oh, okay. Well, if anybody could, we appreciate it.
All right. Let's continue. All right, we're going to take a 10-minute break and be back. So get yourself refreshed and come back in 10 minutes. Shabbat Shalom, Mashpakhah. We are back. Is everyone there? Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom.
All right. For the purpose of those who may not be able to see the chat, we can't see the chat outside of when we actually go on the breaks. But for the purpose of those who were not able or who are not able to see the chat, we were providing some additional clarity.
Taking a bathroom break. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. So I responded in the chat, but for those who are listening to the recording, they wouldn't see this response. Just a quick reminder. Remember, they went into slavery in Mitzrayim because of wrongs. They would have adopted to the ways of the Egyptians, started to serve other mighty ones. We know this because of what is said in Yahusha ben Nun, or Joshua 24 verse 14. We're also told that in Yakazakal or Ezekiel 20 that they would have taken up the practices of the Egyptians and served the mighty ones of Mitzrayim. And so the Most High would have in essence, the consequences of that, the right ruling against them was being enslaved by these Egyptians. So when blood was placed over the door and they were delivered or saved from death and destruction, observe that they left the very next yom. They left, or very next Leela rather, they would have been delivered because their wrongs placed them in slavery. The blood of the Lamb protected them from death and destruction. And that which they were protected from, which affected the Mitzri, is what provoked Pharaoh to call Aharon and Moshe in the middle of the Leela to say, listen, you people need to get out of here. And so they were delivered. They were made free, even as Yahusha HaMashiach, through his death, has made us free from being enslaved to wrongs and fear and to everything that goes against the plan of the Most High for our guym, or our lives. All right? Did everyone get that?
Done.
All right.
Meaning, question. So meaning that Yasharel's right. So if they are not under Yasharel, then that means that it doesn't apply to them?
What? Not sure what you're referring to.
You know, as far as, so say our family's still under God. So with that captivity, or shall I say that them not celebrating the feast, whatever that freeness that we have, they don't have?
They have access to it, but they're not yet free until they return to the Most High Yahuah.
Gotcha. Okay.
So though we are all still in physical exile, even as people such as Daniel, Yakazakal or Ezekiel, who though they were still physically in exile, they were delivered from the right rulings of the Most High whilst in exile. Likewise, there are those of us who have returned to the Most High Yahuah, and we have been delivered from the system's enslavement of our rook and our minds to religious dogma. But there are still those of our brothers and sisters who are asleep, who are still enslaved, who are still shackled. Religion comes from religare, which means to bind. So they are still bound in the enslavement of religion. And only the return to the Most High Yahuah, only Yahuah through Yahusha HaMashiach can deliver them or free them from that, from being bound.
Gotcha.
So they still have access to being delivered, still have access to being free from all of that, because Yahusha HaMashiach has not yet returned. So there is still the opportunity to walk in what is right and walk out of the system of bondage. But we also have to bring the word to them, even if they will not listen, even if they will not hear. We are still required to sow seeds of the word of the Most High, to still say, this is what Yahuah expects, to still speak about observing the Shabbat, to still talk about turning away from religious man-made doctrines and back to the instructions of the Most High, to still explain that the Torah is not done away with, never was, and Paul was not talking about that, but he was speaking of the written debt that we owed because of the wrongs of our people. And that redemption means that we have been paid for by Yahushua HaMashiach. And just as a speeding ticket, you remember that example of the speeding ticket where we did the wrong, we deserve the ticket, but we ask for pardon. The judge says, okay, I will pardon you this time. Someone else ends up paying the fine for us, in this case Yahushua HaMashiach. But it doesn't mean that now the law is done away with and we don't have to follow the law anymore. It means that we've been given another opportunity to make it right by following the instructions, or what is called the law. So these are the little discussions we will need to have with them constantly. There will be pushback, even as some of us at some point push back. But Yahuah is the one who causes the increase. Yada Yahuah.
Yada Yahuah. So we're going to read, I'm going to ask someone to read on Safan Yahu, Zephaniah 3 verse 9.
For that I shall turn unto the peoples a clean lip, so that they all call on the name of Yahuah to serve him with one shoulder.
So that's for reading. So in
Safan Yahu,
Zephaniah 3 verse 9, the phrase one consent is derived from the Hebrew term pronounced shakath, which is also understood as shoulder or shoulder to shoulder in certain contexts. The meaning suggests a unified effort or joint purpose, as in mutual agreement. It can convey a sense of people being aligned together or unified in purpose, as though they are working side by side, shoulder to shoulder, in their worship and service to Yahuah. For then will I turn to the people a pure language, that they may all call upon the name of Yahuah to serve him shoulder to shoulder. So this reflects the unity in action. The people serving Yahuah with a common purpose and strength, standing together in a coordinated collective effort. The image of standing shoulder to shoulder suggests that the people will be so unified in their worship that they are acting as one body, unified in heart, mind, and purpose. So why is this important? The Hebrew root for shoulder, shakath, connects to the idea of carrying a burden together, which is fitting when speaking of people coming together to serve Yahuah in unity. This understanding emphasizes cohesion and collective responsibility as opposed to just mutual agreement or consent. So this interpretation opens up a deeper understanding of Zephaniah 3 verse 9. It speaks to a time when Yahuwah's people will be restored, not only in language, but also in the unified effort of worship, service, and communal action in alignment with His will. So this collective worship would be an essential part of the final regathering of Yahuwah's people in the last Yomim, or last days.
So in essence, we're responding to the constant division among the people of the Most High concerning how to speak the language and the differing views, when to observe feasts and the differing views, the differing reckonings of time. And Yahuwah says, I will return to the people a pure language, and they will call upon the name of Yahuwah, and they will serve him with one shoulder, or they will serve him shoulder to shoulder, or they will serve him with one consent. In other words, they will serve him in one accord with the same agreement. There will be no differences. There will be no need for confusion regarding the language, regarding how to worship Yahuwah, because he will ensure that this restoration is complete. Yada Yahuwah.
Yada Yahuwah. So different views on calendars and dates of feasts. So the different views on calendars and the dates of the feast are ongoing issue among those seeking to observe Yahuwah's appointed times, or muadym. Can you hear us? Mashpakhah, are you hearing us? And you can see what's on the screen, right? Different views on calendars and days of feast. All right. So these differences often stem from a variety of historical, cultural, and theological reasons, including the Babylonian-based lunar reckoning to include the addition of month at some point, of a month at some point, solar-based reckoning such as the Zadokite with the addition of a week at some point, and the Enochian with the addition of a yom or day at some point. And also the differences in how to count the months and yomim. So this has led to confusion with different groups observing the same feast on different dates, or interpreting the beginning of the year and the appointed times differently. Nothing is new. What is happening now has happened before. The mere fact that various reckonings of times are found from various ancient Hebrew sources tell us the entire nation at some point lost unity in times. As well, and even the language. It is Yahuwah who will bring us all back together, purify the language, and cause us to move as one body, one shoulder, one consent. Yada Yahuwah.
Yada Yahuwah. So the fact that we have seen historically different inscriptions, different writings showing different reckonings of time tells us that this differing views on when what should happen is not new. This happened before. Otherwise, we would all historically find only one reckoning of time in history. But we're seeing different reckonings based on different research, which tells us that different communities of Yisrael would have observed different reckonings, even as it is now. And this is why we depend on Yahuah in the regathering of his people to purify the language, to bring us all into one accord, one sound, one thought, a unified purpose, rather than the differing views, which in various cases have resulted even in division.
Yahuah.
So the focus of the feast at this time is for us to honor Yahuah, for us to honor Yahuah. Some people may say, well, I don't know the perfect time. There are instances in scripture, and when you watch the feast presentations, you'll see too, there are instances where the people of the Most High forgot. Zakan read earlier from Jubilees 1 and Jubilees 6. I believe it was
34.
6 verse 34 and 1 verse what? 13 or 14, something like that. Yeah. Where Yahuah says, my people are going to forget. They're going to mess up how the year is to begin. They're going to forget how the seasons are to happen. They're going to forget a lot of things concerning the appointed times. But Yahuah is saying here in Zephaniah 3:9, he's the one who's going to purify the language. He's the one who is going to bring us back all together so that we are worshiping him shoulder to shoulder. Yada Yahuah.
Yada Yahuah. So the same chapter speak of restoration and purification, where Yahuah promises to restore unity and clarity in his people's worship and service to him. This prophetic promise can be seen as a declaration that in the future, when Yahuah gathers his people and restores them fully, the confusion surrounding the correct reckoning of times and the days of the feast will be resolved. This purification of language in Zephaniah 3 verse 9 can also be seen as a metaphor for the purification of worship practices, which would include aligning the correct observance of Yahuah's appointed times. The unification of worship will not only be in the language of the heart, but also in external practices, meaning that all of Yahuah's people will observe his feast at the same time, as prescribed in the restored, purified times. In this future time, there will be no more confusion about Passover and the 14th of Abib, Feast of Weeks or Shabaoth, or the Feast of Sukkot, because Yahuah will bring all his people into alignment. The prophetic idea is that when the people are restored, they will serve Yahuah with one consent, meaning that divisions over these observances will cease.
Yada Yahuah.
Yada Yahuah. Different views on the language. In the ancient world, the Hebrew language evolved over time. By the time of Zephaniah, the Hebrew language had likely already gone through some changes from the classical Hebrew used in earlier texts to a more Aramaic influenced form of Hebrew, which was the lingua of much of the ancient Near East during the time. Moreover, there are different dialects and interpretations of Hebrew across different regions, groups, and periods. Yahuah will restore a pure language. This could mean that all his people will return to a common, unified language, a language of truth, perhaps even a pure form of Hebrew Abrit or its spiritual equivalent, used for proper worship and service. The pure language will be the language of the restored worship of Yahuah, eliminating the confusion and division caused by the difference in Abrit dialects or linguistic interpretation. This Nabah, or prophecy, foretells a time when all will speak the same language, and no one will be confused or divided by the different forms of Abrit used throughout history. Purification of the language in this context also refers to spiritual purification, where language, whether spoken or written, is no longer mixed with idolatrous influences, false doctrine, or Rasha practices. So let us seek to honor Yahuah and not divide the body with strivings that existed before and will continue until Yahuah makes all this right.
Yada Yahuah.
Yada Yahuah.
Yada Yahuah.
Yada Yahuah.
All right, we're gonna repeat Tahal 190, verse 113 to verse 120. Looking at the Samak. And as we do earlier, we read what's in red first, and then we continue to the one in black. So after 2, Akkad, Shatim. Safim, I hate, but thy Torah do I love. Karim, you are my shield. I have waited for your word. Saru, from you first. I will keep the command of
Elohim.
Samakani, according unto your word, and let me not be ashamed of my expectation. Sadani, I shall be saved, and I always your statutes. Salit, all them that hear
from my statute,
for their deceit is falsehood.
Guym,
You have made peace all the wrong of the earth. Therefore, I love your Samar, my flesh, for fear of you, and I am in awe of your right rule. Yada Yahuah.
I like these.
Praise and thanksgiving.
Wherever you are, just lift your hands and worship the Most High Yahuah. For He is great and greatly to be praised. Yada Yahuah. Here's a song of praise. We say, Yahuah.